Hi guys, it's Heidi from Create Dream Explore, and I'm here to share with you all about my narrative writing organizer that I use in Google Slides. So I created this resource because my students were struggling to keep all of their graphic organizers organized, and I found we'd have all of these papers spread out all over the table, and then people were losing papers. It just wasn't working for me, and I wanted to help create a little bit more independence as well. So I found that using my organizer has provided a little bit of self-direction for my students, and it's allowed me a little bit more time to conference with my students, to have a small group session. So I'll go ahead and show you how it works. Just get rid of that, and I'll share my screen with you so you can see the slides. Okay, so here's the first slide that they would see when they open up the organizer. I'll just make it a little bigger. And then the second slide is, I like to call it a map. So this is the main page that they can go to, and it tells them what step they need to complete in which order. So they start here, and you can see little arrows on each box there that tells them which way to go. So they would start here, and I've included two different organizers for them to start with. One is narrative plot brainstorming ideas, and this one has 4 spots for them to put their brainstorming ideas, and then the other page looks like this, and it has 5 spots. So I let my students pick, and I really did have, I'd say about a third of the class chose this one, and then the rest of them chose this one, probably because of the graphic. It's a little more visually appealing, but I wanted them to pick the one that they were most comfortable with. So on this slide, they brainstorm ideas for what they can write about. So I wanted them to come up with at least 4 different ideas, and then they pick the best one to write their story about. Then when they're done that, they go back up to the map, and they'll go to the next slide. Click here to brainstorm your titles. So based on the story that they decided to write about, they're going to come up with 5 interesting titles, and then they'll pick the best one. Then they go back up to the map. And then this one, there's character slides. So it looks like this. And the reason I chose to have that in there is because I found in the past my students were all making themselves the main character or friends in the class. They weren't really doing any character development. So I found that actually having them plan out their characters, what is their personality, what are their likes, what are their dislikes, it kind of forced them to really include that into their story. So when they're done doing that, they go back up to the map and then click here to plan their setting. So for the setting, I have them type out a description of when and where the story takes place, and then I had them go and find a Google image that matched with what the setting was that they were describing. And then they would go back up to the map again, but I'm just going to quickly go through the rest of the slides for you. So this slide is optional, and it's a plot outline or a narrative sequence, and some of my students I didn't have do this. My students on IEPs, it was a little bit too much work for them, so I took this slide out of theirs, but then I left it for others. And that's the nice thing about the digital organizers, is that you can customize it a little bit. You can take out slides, you can move slides around, totally up to you. So on this one, they would, what's the beginning, what are the main events, and what's the conclusion. The next slide, they'll brainstorm their hook. And I've done a lot of work with my students around bold beginnings. You might have seen my bold beginnings organizer that we used. And I have a paper version as well. So they brainstorm their hook. They can come up with 3 different ones and pick the best one. Then they will brainstorm what are their main events going to be. And the reason it looks like this is because I teach my students that the events should build on each other. They're not just random events happening in a story. They should all build on each other. So they will work their way up from the bottom. Then the next slide is brainstorming your endings. So again, they're going to brainstorm 3 different endings and pick the best one. They're not writing a whole paragraph here. It's just a couple sentences to end the story off with a bang, I guess I like to say. And then I let them design a cover page. They can use some Google images or use Google drawings, use fancy fonts. They really enjoy that part of it. And then when they're done that, they go and actually write their story. And the nice thing is that they've already done a lot of the work. So for some things, they can go back and copy and paste it into their story and then just expand on it and add more details. And then when they're all done, they're going to go to this page, which is check your success criteria. Does my title match my story? And they'll go over here and they can type a comment about whether or not the title matches the story. Did I create a setting by describing where and when the story takes place? I describe the characters in my narrative. So they can go through and fill that out, and it's really helps them to determine whether they've actually met their learning goals or not. So that's it for my narrative organizer. If you have any questions, just ask me in the comments below. I'm happy to help you out, happy to answer any of your questions. And take care. Have a great day.